Hey everybody, I'm excited to bring you this week's episode with saxophone influencers Steve Kortyka and Ryan Devlin. But before we get to that, there's a special guest in the house, and I couldn't pass up having her just do a little cameo for us today. The CEO of MGS Global Group is here, of course, Aya Schlachter.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Hey, well, thanks for checking everything out. I'm so excited to have you here because this is the first time I've seen you in, gosh, how many months? 3 months, maybe?
Probably.
Right? You were off. She's been off in the Philippines, managing her teams and just getting back to know home after the pandemic and such and everything. But if you guys remember, Aya was the designer of this design of the basement. So I wanted to get her impressions. Actually, I wanted everybody listening out there to hear her impressions of the design she helped create for me and what she thinks of it. This is the first time of her seeing it, so she's here in the space here today. What do you think, Aya?
I think it's stunning.
Yeah?
I think that the design really resonates your personality and what's going to come of this space. It's very subtle, and I'm just trying to, take it all in. It's my first 10 minutes here.
Right.
So I love it. And, and the orange really pops your logo, the Jim Reinvention Revolution panel. It really pops.
Against the great background. Yeah, it's pretty
cool,
and the
microphone, too.
Yep.
It's really... And it sounds amazing.
I know. That was the thing you noticed when you walked down into the step, from the steps down into the space.
Yep.
Right, because you remember how it used to sound. Yeah.
I'm still in shock because it took a while for us to come up with a design. But in the end...
We had many iterations behind the scenes
Jim?
here. A lot.
Yeah.
And that was a lot it was just my... challenge or growth to kind of just figure out what do I want in the space. We had some like color options and stuff like that, and I thought maybe we need a bunch of color or different things. I wanted to look really cool, whatever, but it was sort of like, it's a journey. It's going on a journey to figure out what the space really should look like. I think in the end I came to the realization, like, it should be more subtle, because whatever's going to happen here, we'll let that creative part be.
I agree 100%.
Be forward, not the design of the space.
No, it was also a learning experience for us as designers as well,
right,
to cater to different types of musicians,
right,
and also their needs. And I think this really was the best option.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that was cool. So fun. So what else? Okay, so what are we doing today?
Third wave coffee shops.
Okay. So since I haven't seen Aya in a few months, we're just going to hang out, catch up, get some coffee, maybe get some food, and just see what's going on. So that's what's going on with me right now. So we're going to get off the podcast and go do that. And maybe I'll add this a little bit more before we get to Steve's episode, but stick around. Okay. Hey, gang. So I'm back from hanging out with Aya. Aya, again, thanks for just popping in real quick before we had coffee yesterday. We had a great time just kind of midday hanging out and catching up. Shout out to Etta Coffee in the new Intro building here in Ohio City, in Cleveland, Ohio. And shout out to Lucco Coffee on Detroit Avenue, I think in West 26th here in Ohio City. I had a nice couple of cortados over there. I think Aya had lattes, so we were just exploring and experimenting with the new coffee shops in town. It was fun. But right now, I want to get to Steve and Ryan's episode. But real quick, I just wanted to remind people, and people on the email list already know this because they saw the once a year email I sent out. Maybe it's 2 or 3 times a year. They know about the new, I guess, links that I got out there. One is for Ko-Fi. So if you haven't heard of that, Ko-Fi or coffee, it's actually ko-fi.com/JimJim99. So if you haven't heard of Ko-Fi, it's kind of like a Patreon sort of thing where it's a way to show your love of the podcast. If you want to buy me a coffee for a suggested $3 donation, or if you want to sign up for a monthly recurring donation, or any other amount that you're interested in, that helps support the show, helps me keep it rolling, helps me pay for my podcasting host and all the other things that swirl around the show. So that's out there, and that is new. And so the people in the newsletter email list have already seen that. Also, I have a new link tree. If you've heard of Linktree, it's where you can find all these links easily under one moniker, one name. So it's, Linktree, linktr.ee /JimJim99. Again, the Ko-Fi is under JimJim99, and the Linktree is under JimJim99. And if you just remember one, just remember the Linktree, because the Ko-Fi link is under there. But that also has links directly to the podcast, to, let's see what I put on there, to download the priming guide that goes to the JJRR website. I got a link that goes directly to the JJRR resources. So if you want to check out that mantra book I recommend, for example. I know everybody out there is meditating and concentrating on their mantras. Also, it's got my Twitter out there, which is Jimmy M Group. Jimmy M Group consulting website that's out there that really needs severely updated, but you can check it out if you want. And Instagram and all those kind of things. And it has the last episode, quick link to get to the last episode, 96, Technology, Mindfulness, Humans First, with Rob Kraychek. If you haven't listened to that, check it out. That's episode 96. Anyways, Linktree is kind of a fun thing I'm experimenting with, and I think it's cool to check out. And again, all the links that you're looking for will be there, including the Ko-Fi link. So check that out. And also remember, you can sign up for the priming guide and be notified of these things early, assuming I get my button gear and send you out an email if you join the email list. And of course, you'll get the priming guide, my seven simple ways to prime your mind for reinvention. So check that out. Okay, let's get to Steve and Ryan's episode, because I'm excited for you to listen to these guys talk about their social media. And in the saxophone world, we go saxophone nerdy on this one. But these guys were in town. I want to take advantage of just some guys that are really, at the top of their craft in the saxophone and jazz improv world. And we talk about violence on your brain. Yeah, Steve. Okay, you're going to have to listen to the episode to figure out what that means. But check it out, because I think it's useful for everyone to kind of think about and learn about. Yeah, and then we talk about the tour that they're on, that they just finished up now by the time this episode gets released. But, check them out in the New England, Northeast area, New York City area. I'm sure they might be probably having other gigs based around this new record that they just released, A Series of Circumstances. So check that out too. Anyways, I'm going to stop talking and let's get to the episode right now.
Welcome to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit JimJim'sReinventionRevolution.com for instant access. And now, here's your host, Jim.
Let's see. Yeah, it's got to be pretty close, unfortunately.
Cool beans.
Yeah, it's got to be close.
Check the mic.
Sorry.
Check. No, you're good, dude.
Yeah, it sounds good if you're like this far. If you're this far away, it's perfect. Sorry. But
yeah. No, if we have to talk at the same time, we'll just get real close. We'll get super close, bro. Super close.
Hey everybody, hey, this is Jim, and welcome to episode 97 of Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. And I'm talking today with Steve Kortyka and Ryan Devlin. And what are we talking about today, guys?
We're going to talk about music, social media. We were on the road right now, which is why we're here in Cleveland and sitting face to face for.
Oh my God! I can't believe this is really happening.
Yeah, so we're going to hopefully talk about the tour and all the exciting things that we've been doing with the traveling and all that.
Right, sounds good, guys. Yeah, I'm a little bit awkward at interviewing people in person because I haven't done it in like over 2.5 years.
Yeah,
actually, since the shutdown. So people that are out there listening to the podcast remember Steve, episode 68. You knew that, right, Steve?
I couldn't remember the number, but yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you do. It was episode 68, so if you're out there, check out JJRR 68. And we recorded that, I think it was like April, March 2020. Mm-hmm. So the shutdown happened in February, like end of February or whatever. And I titled it Escape from New York because you'd booked out in New York because New York was starting to be a real hot spot. Yeah, it was a hot spot for COVID, and I had lost all my gigs. I wasn't making any money and having to pay rent and stuff. It was a dark scene. Yeah, it was bad. That's why I was like, I got to see what's up with this cat, because it was like scaring me. I was in Asia. I just gotten back, and I was like, let me see what Steve's up to. And I tell him, like, hey, man, maybe you should get out of there. But when I texted you, you were like already back in Ohio. So like you already had hit the escape valve. So I'm like, okay, cool, dude.
Yeah.
He's all right. And so that was kind of an interesting time. So I actually went and listened to that episode last night before I knew you were coming over here today to kind of put myself back in that frame of mind and what you were doing back then, because it's 2 years later now, a little bit over 2 years later now. And I saw that you were progressing. So some of the things we talked about was reinventing yourself as a working musician when all your gigs go away. I mean, that was crazy time, right?
Yeah.
And at that time, you were digging into kind of going all in more so on the internet, right? On developing content, PDFs, YouTube channel, Instagram, that kind of stuff. And so now that I got both of you guys here today, which we'll talk about Ryan here in a second here, about how you guys are just slamming on the internet now. I noticed that your channels have probably doubled or tripled in terms of like your followers or viewership or whatever like that.
Definitely.
So tell me what's been happening since the shutdown, since you went online. What were the kind of benefits or the growth that you've seen?
Yeah, for me personally, I'm sure for Ryan as well. Like I noticed the pandemic was kind of a blessing for building an online thing, because everybody's available and you kind of know what everybody's doing. They're all going to be within their devices or pretty close to their computers. So in that sense, it was easier to get people's attention. So yeah, during that time, I was just rapidly creating content. And I was at the very beginning of that in the first interview that we did. Right. And coming out of it, I think I have like 8 published books that are not like officially published, but they're all on my site. And they've generated a decent amount of income over the last couple of years. And I have those there. They're just there forever now. And they're just my ideas about music and creating, just better melodies and workbooks and things like that. So just to have that now, when I go into new situations and meet new people, it's great, because sometimes I'm not always able to teach a lesson, but I can say, hey, check out this book that I wrote. This is a lot of my ideas all in one place. So that's been super helpful, and I think we might have talked about this in the first podcast, but like having those things available, it takes time to create all those things, and then once you have them there, they don't go anywhere. So that's been great. And yeah, I think, I don't know, over the pandemic, I'm curious, Ryan, how many you noticed you got, but I think I got about 10,000 followers since the pandemic started, and then leading up to now. So just because of the amount of activity I was doing, I think it helped really generate all that attention.
Yeah, well, I think there was like maybe like a double or triple whammy there, where it's like now you have time to create more content, but then everybody else had a little more time to consume the content, to like check you out, find you, right? Because we're all like, we didn't have to commute anymore, at least for a while, at least right in the thick of everything that summer of 2020. Yeah. So that was interesting. Yeah, and I noticed I was just looking at your numbers. Actually, when we were talking before, I think you had less than 1,000 followers on YouTube, because that's what you were going for in terms of monetization, starting to be able to monetize, right? Yeah. So you must have had less. Now you have like 2.5. And on your Instagram, I remember looking at it before. It was around that time. It was about maybe 9,000 followers. I think now it's like doubled up to 18 point something, whatever. Yeah. So how is the monetization part happening with those social platforms, aside from the content through your website?
Yeah, YouTube, I came to find out, along the way, that they actually take hours away after a year of a video being up. They will remove the hours that it accrued after that year. So it's kind of this weird system.
It's like resets. You got to start over again.
It doesn't start over, but a great video can only generate so many watch hours, which is what they want when they're looking for monetization. So that way, you can't just get some guy that makes an awesome video and then is monetized for life. Right. They have it set up like built into their system, so you only really get a good year out of a video. I see. And then it starts to kind of decrease in value in the eyes of YouTube. So I learned that along the way, and then because things opened back up, I had a little bit less time to make the YouTube videos, because it was very time consuming. So I didn't completely give up. Like I still like add to my YouTube channel every once in a while, but I kind of stopped focusing on monetization just for the time being, but definitely still have a goal to do that.
So, well, maybe that can segue a little bit to what you're doing now, because during that time, obviously, it's kind of a dark time. You concentrated on that, but in the meantime, what I want to know is, actually, I remember 2 things about this. So there's 2 things I want to know. Yeah. One was, how did you first stumble upon Ryan Devlin? How'd you guys get connected?
Yeah, great question. So I would just see videos of this cat playing. Like sometimes the way the algorithm works on Instagram is just whatever you hashtag, that'll show up in your feed sometimes. So I would see videos of him playing. And then my friend at the time, Chad Lefkowitz Brown, told me to check out Ryan. And I had seen that Chad was doing like summer camps at Ryan's school. Or would you call that a school? Or
yeah, it was like a workshop that I created.
A workshop that he created.
Okay.
And I'm
Cool.
like, who's this guy creating jazz workshops? And then I come to find out Ryan's only like 20 years old, like starting his own jazz workshop. And he'd have all these great artists. He'd have like Dick Oates come in and Terrell Stafford and
Nussbaum.
Yeah. And did you have Jerry come?
No, I didn't know him yet. Yeah,
it's going down though. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I just once I saw that, I was like, okay, well I got to keep an eye out for him. He's not going anywhere. If he's making jazz camps and playing his butt off already at that age. So yeah, and then we started messaging on Instagram, and then before you know it, we had met in person, and then talked about making an album together, and we just get along. He's a super cool dude. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah, that was cool. Well, I remember that when I was listening to your episode back then. This is back in 2020. You were messing around with Sios mouthpieces.
Yep.
Right. And you got me turned on to them, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool. It's really interesting." Tech approach that they have, and you can customize it to whatever you want. They're really cool customer service wise to work with. Mm-hmm. And so I think you had brought some mouthpieces over and you said, oh, this is like a Ryan Devlin signature model. I'm like, what? Yeah, man. Who's Ryan Devlin, dude? Whatever, but that was my first time I heard your name, Ryan. So I think that's pretty funny. And then, and I didn't pay attention to him. Like, whatever. Steve knows all these cats. I don't know who this is. I blew it off for like months. And then it's like I had the mouthpiece I think laying around my house because I did that little video. I did a little review video on YouTube.
Yeah,
of the mouthpieces.
It got some good views, man.
Right, it did actually.
Yeah.
So that was like I was like trying out, watching what you were doing. I'm like, let me try this YouTube thing. I like to experiment, not necessarily go all in on these things, but. So anyways, I finally decided to look this cat up, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And he was like, what, 22 maybe?
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, what am I doing with myself?
Yeah.
But anyways, so for people that don't know Ryan out there, I know we're going sax nerdy today, but these cats are in town, and I think it's valuable to get their perspective on some of these things. First, on the technology side, we'll talk about Ryan's social media here in a second. But also on the mindset and how to train your mind in terms of grasping new information. So I want to get to that part because I think that's useful for everybody that's listening. But Ryan, tell me what you got going on with your social media because you've been into it. You have a big follower base. How do you think about it and what's going on with it?
Yeah, I started taking social media seriously probably about like 2018-ish, maybe 2017. I started like with my own just a personal Instagram that I would just post about, like family vacations, like everything that we used to do back then. And I remember
it wasn't strictly music based.
No, not at first.
You just were just kind of messing around, having fun.
Yeah, just me and my friend. I golf a lot, so it was a lot of golf stuff. Just like posting about random stuff when I was in high school and whatever. But then, when I got to undergrad, I noticed that a lot of people my age were starting to take it a little bit more seriously, and like the musicians around, and I didn't even know Steve yet, but I knew a lot of his friends, were using that social media to sell things and to like, promote themselves and gigs and such. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to start taking this seriously. So I remember I went through, and I looked up other people's pages, see what they were doing. And I posted myself practicing probably like almost every day for like 2 years, of me, trying to relate to other people my age, practicing stuff and kind of writing what I was working on, and people, I think resonated with it and said, "Oh, I'm doing the same kind of thing. I can get down with this." And I wanted to make it a community, so I would like reply to comments, ask people to comment things, whatever. And then it kind of snowballed into, asking other pages to repost me and, get more followers and whatnot. And at the beginning of 2020, I was probably around like 7,000 or 8,000. And now I think I'm almost to 18. I think I'm like 17.8 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I just, it was like an everyday thing. I would practice, I'd post a video of what I was practicing, and then I would do it the next day, and to see how it would kind of grow from there.
And that's on YouTube or?
No, on Instagram.
On Instagram, okay.
Yeah, this is like right when Instagram started doing like 1-minute videos.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah, whatever year that was.
All right.
And I would just post that every day, you know, a little clip every day, 1 minute or whatever. And people seemed to like it and would start reposting it, and then I would just, you know, try and grow my community by, you know, messaging people like Steve and Chad, and I was taking lessons with Chad, so I would ask him about what he was doing on social media and just trying to kind of make my own version of whatever someone else was doing, and it's opened so many doors, you know, like meeting Steve, being able to do this album really was a product of social media. Being able to do this tour is a product of social media. A lot of venues won't, you know, want to take a chance on us because we have a following, and they think that they'll be able to make money from promotional or whatever, and we're just making a bigger outreach, which is, I think, the goal in this kind of thing. So yeah.
Well, I think it's just again, it's not everybody grasps it or wants to be involved in it. I get that, but I think it's just so fruitful if you kind of crack the code on it, see the value that it can bring for yourself, like you said, in all these different areas where it's like it creates connections, friendships, you know, business opportunities, you know, people that would give you a second look that just never would have, you would never would have imagined yourself you could kind of just communicate with. I think it's, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's kind of like, you know, they say it's sort of like it's who you know, but it's really sort of who knows you that can recommend you or connect you in some way, right? And that's what the social media does. It raises your profile of like, oh, people just know who you are. They might not like you, they might not choose you, but they might, you know, because they know who you are now. And
at least there's that opportunity now because of that.
Yeah,
you know, like,
exactly. So that's what's fun about it. And so cool. So that's interesting. Just to hear your perspective of how you kind of thought about it or grew it, and just the value that we've been able to get out of it. And again, for like just finding those opportunities for like booking your tour or whatever, it's like, you know, now it's not like a cold call necessarily. It's like a warmer call for a new venue, because they can look at your social media and be like, oh, well, I can see their history, what they've been doing. Yeah. They've got this following. It's, you know, it's a little bit easier. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So now that you guys listening out there, you know, realize like these are, you know, some of the saxophone influencer cats that are out there these days. They're in this crew of people. I think it's pretty interesting, fun for me to see for sure. But as it relates to any business or any kind of endeavor you're going after, I think it's an interesting model to kind of use that approach. So let's switch gears and talk about now this approach about kind of digging into your mindset and training yourself. So you guys are like, you know, just like an athlete would kind of approach their endeavors, and maybe, you know, high-level engineers or whatever it might be, someone who's really got a subject matter expertise that's going after it and wants to keep developing themselves. I think it can be a struggle. And I remember, Steve, you told me this term, which I'm not sure I agreed with it or understood it when you mentioned it. This was just recently when we were talking about how to learn how to improvise. So training yourself, trying to get all the chords down and getting things under your fingers. You said it was a violent process to you. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And I was like, wait, violent process? I didn't even think about it.
The look on your face, I was like, this is going to lead to a deeper conversation.
Right? But now that I've thought about it and now that I've experienced it, so this is one of the things that when we got together, so it was 2020, nobody was doing anything. By the end of 2020, I think it was, I started taking lessons with you. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't taken lessons in probably 25 years, maybe. Yeah. I just like playing the horn. I like playing music. Sure, I learned a few things, but I didn't know how to teach myself really that much, I don't think. Now I'm learning like what it really takes to teach myself. But going through that process was very instructive for me, because, you know, I had to sit down and really, my hands, the way my brain was connected to my hands and everything, I had to like break it all apart and slow it down. And it was very frustrating because it was all attached in this weird way that,
almost like violent in a way, you
know? Yeah. And so it was like, it was brutal to my brain. Like, this is hard to do. It's hard to change your behavior. You know, when you've kind of done it a certain way all these years, and it's like, okay, I'm trying to learn new information now and approach it in a new way. Like, I literally would have to like slow my fingers down and be very specific about, okay, I got to play this scale or just this little phrase and then try to translate it in my head in all 12 keys and all this stuff. It's like, this is hard. It's hard when you haven't really done it before. It's getting a little bit more fluid now because I've been able to break my brain apart. But it felt like, man, I can only spend like 15 minutes on this max before my head's going to explode. And then I got to take a break.
Yeah.
And I never thought about it in this violent way that when you said that word, I was like, holy shit, no way. But I think it kind of is.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. So maybe both of you give me your perspective on that term, violent, in terms of trying to deal with your brain in this way and learning new things.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about it, or how is there some way that you can make it, I guess, less violent or less painful? I don't know.
Absolutely. And I love that Ryan's here and we're having this conversation, because this is something that's always been fascinating to me, is just how different people learn different stuff. And I think for me, the reason that word makes sense is because I didn't really get into improvisation until what I would consider later on in my life as a musician. Like when I got to college, I was still learning music theory. I was learning intervals and like a lot of the technical aspects that a lot of people who are great improvisers, they learn much earlier on in their development. So I was still learning, all the chords and things like that were just totally foreign to me when I was 18 or 19 years old. I didn't know what any of that stuff meant. So to hear cats that knew all this stuff already at my age and had it together even my first year of college was a little terrifying to me, and it put me in almost like emergency mode, where I felt like I needed to learn all this stuff. So I was in the practice room, like 6 to 8 hours every day, just trying to play catch up, so to speak. And that's where the rewiring starts, and that's where for your mind it can be very confusing, because you're telling your brain and your fingers as a saxophone player to do all these things that it's not used to doing yet. And if you look at it from an athlete's perspective, that's the equivalent of like exercising 6 to 8 hours a day and then expecting to be stronger in 3 days or something like that. It just doesn't happen. And I think our brains are the same way when we're building neurons and trying to make new associations for ourselves. So that's just my ideas on that, and over time I've gradually ironed out the process and have gotten better at not getting so stressed out when I don't know something right away, and understanding the process that it's going to take a little bit of time, but if I just keep doing certain things a certain way, that eventually it'll become automatic. You're always training yourself to put these things from your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, and that's I think the greatest improvisers, they are always operating from their subconscious mind, and it's just as natural as breathing, for them to create ridiculously amazing solos and stuff. But getting to that point, there's a lot of programming and I'm not going to keep saying violence. Yeah, I'm not going to keep saying that word, but there's a lot of things that are uncomfortable for your mind to process right away. So
yeah, uncomfortable. I guess maybe that's a subtler way to to describe it. Yeah. But for me, I just know for myself, it's been really uncomfortable. It's like, wow, this is a challenge. And after the first few months, I had to slow my hands down. It was really crazy, just because I hadn't done it in this structured way, in a specific, intentional way in a long time. And there was a couple times where I just kind of, was like looking in the mirror one day, just looking at myself like, what the hell are you thinking that you're doing? Yeah. I questioned whether I could do it or not. Because it's like, what am I doing? Like, am I too old for this? Why am I mean, we all had time on our hands, so it's like I thought it was a great opportunity to try to better myself. Yeah. But I really questioned whether I had the capacity. Thinking all this time that I kind of knew I had the capacity, but I never concentrated on music. I didn't go to music school. I went to engineering school and had another career, but it was always inside me, the passion and whatever. And I always knew, sometimes I would see cats that did go to music school, whatever. It's like, man, they're not any better than me or whatever. Or just, I just didn't do that back then. So I thought internally I had the capacity, but then when I actually was trying it and I had to reprogram my brain, I'm like, oh, maybe I don't. Yeah. I was like, because this is uncomfortable. Yeah. So and just age-wise, we're all kind of 3 different ages. So I'm maybe 10, 12 years older than Steve. Steve's maybe 10, 12 years older than Ryan. Ryan, you're kind of still in your 20s. Yep. You're in graduate school. How are you feeling about this? Did you feel this uncomfortableness, or have you felt it yet? Or like, because when you're a kid growing up, you don't know any better. You just start learning stuff because that's the expectation of life. That's your job as a kid. You're in school, right?
Yeah. And I had the great fortune of having my dad be a fantastic saxophone player, and that's was my influence in when I was younger. My dad's been teaching saxophone and playing saxophone my whole life, and so when I was younger, I was like learning piano because I was interested in music, and my mom and dad were like, "You're going to learn how to play piano first because that's probably the hardest, to learn how to read music." And then, I was always very interested in the saxophone. And then one day I just like asked my dad for lessons because I was just curious, and I just wanted to kind of.
Oh, so he didn't push him on you?
No,
He just
not at all. No.
I love that. Okay, well,
and it was nice because I ended up enjoying it much more that way.
No doubt.
So for me, I never thought like the process, or I never felt really any pressure to play or to practice. I guess maybe from my dad, and I guess another thing was I was always trying to be at dad's level, if not better.
Sure.
He was like my first punching bag, I suppose.
Right.
And so I was always trying to play my scales faster than him and all this stuff. And, I was very much into that competition thing of just wanting to be that kind of thing. And there was a lot of competitions in high school and middle school that I was doing, that I wanted to be the best at, whatever. Mm-hmm. And that was a good goal to set for myself. That's how I've always worked, is just setting short-term and long-term goals for myself, And a lot of my short-term goals when I was younger were to be first chair in all county, all state, all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was good because it made me practice every day, not necessarily thinking about how hard it was, but just going towards that goal.
I see. Okay.
And that's how I still am now. And with this tour, it was a goal. This album was a goal. That sort of thing. And so I've never really felt the violence or the pressure of things. Maybe when I got to college, because I heard more people my age that were like really, really good. Mm-hmm. And that was like, man, I got to get my stuff together. But it's always been like going towards a goal. And no matter what anybody says about that goal, I want to go and do it.
Right, right. Yeah, that's cool.
So that's just always been my mindset and my way. But there's an Elvin Jones quote that I wanted to read because of what you said about the subconscious thing. And Elvin Jones is such a big influence on my playing and me. Playing should be like walking. It should be a natural function for a life of a musician.
Yeah.
So it's like what you were talking about with the subconscious mind thing. It's like, we breathe subconsciously, we walk subconsciously, all this stuff. It's like we want to be able to play and practice so that when we're on the bandstand, we're in our subconscious. We're not in our, So just wanted to add that there.
Yeah. No. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing your experience. In terms of
lucky bastard.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, man.
Exactly. I was looking up just a little information before this. I should bring this up too because I'm thinking like, how do you get so good at such a young age? I'm thinking like, I know, like for me, there's still a frustration in my life that I wasn't close to any really good musician improvising in the stuff that I wanted to do in particular when I was a kid. I just wasn't close to it. My family wasn't close to it. It's not a family of musicians, whatever. And so I was just like, digging up some details about whatever, Sir Ryan Devlin here. And I noticed it said like your dad was like the director of the McDonald's high school, Walt Disney.
Yes.
Band or something like that.
Yeah.
Explain what he was doing.
Yeah. So when my dad, he played music all through his high school and stuff, and he did this Disney college program.
Yeah.
He's from Illinois, and he was at school in Iowa in the Midwest, and he did this Disney college program and fell in love with Disney, right? And so he became the conductor of the Main Street Philharmonic in Walt Disney World.
Okay.
And then eventually that was kind of washed away, and he was on Main Street playing in the saxophone quartet for 30 years.
Yeah.
And being the leader of that.
That's amazing.
So,
this is where this comes from.
Yeah, I had a lot of good influence when I was younger. Absolutely.
Right, exactly.
And still do.
Dad
still
great.
plays and all that stuff. Yeah.
Well, that's great for him. So I'm sure he must have enjoyed it his whole life. It's such a gift. Music is such a gift in all kinds of different ways, right?
Yeah.
And And now he must be super fun for him, just knowing that you're a musician and how good you are and whatever. It's just great all around. It's fun.
Yeah,
I've seen videos that Ryan posts on his Instagram that his dad shot, and you can hear his dad like chuckling in the background. You're definitely proud dad vibes going on.
Yeah.
Even when I'm practicing at home, I go home to Orlando every once in a while, and I will go practice in my old room, and he'll just start chuckling when I'm playing, and or yell funny comments at me, and whatever. It's awesome. It's
now what about your like his parents, like your grandparents? Were they involved in music at all?
Not at all.
Okay,
not at all. Yeah, they're just music lovers, but they're
gotcha.
not. They don't play anything, or it's really started with him.
So I guarantee he's chuckling to himself, thinking like, "Oh my God!" Like it's just unbelievable to his own eyes of how the human capacity that's out there, right?
Yeah.
Being him developing himself, and then being so close to you, and then that's just some wild stuff. But it's instructive in terms of people thinking about, especially in these days, like how do I change? How do I learn something different? How do I pivot? Oh my God, the world's changing in all these different crazy ways. There's just like what I was thinking whatever it was 2 years ago. I'm not sure I have the capacity for this. Like I was trying to change myself. I was trying to dig in this different way.
Right.
And it was super frustrating.
How do you feel now? Do you feel after doing it for a little while, do you feel that you could have the capacity for it, or has your perspective of like what you're actually trying to do changed a little bit so that you're not as frustrated? Because for me personally, like I think that feeling or that despair kind of can come from comparing yourself to somebody else that may have just an insane amount of things together, but the idea that you can't do it, I think, is ridiculous. Like I truly believe that anybody can improvise if they just give themselves enough time and enough patience with it.
Okay, I think despair is a good word.
Yeah,
definitely. I definitely had some despair moments,
right?
Where I'm thinking like, I don't know if I can do this. I'm wasting my time. Like, what am I? It just really felt like I was banging my head against the wall. But I'm through that initial phase, and so I feel like, you know what? I'm starting to understand more about my own brain, my own body, my own challenge of how to get myself going. Like little techniques to, again, like since I've been doing the podcast, it's all about sort of reinvention and breaking your patterns, is what you need. That's why I think traveling is a cool idea. Taking cold showers, there's all these things. If you go to the website and download my 7 simple ways to prime your mind for reinvention, you'll know what those are. But
love it.
But it's still a challenge. Every time I go after it, it's like, God dang it! It's like your brain is just there, like not wanting to allow you to do this. And so that's where the uncomfortableness or violence comes in.
Yeah.
But no, I'm past that first phase, which I credit you with, Steve. It's all your fault. And and so and part of that has been this is another reason why we connect, is your positive attitude and your vision. So I'm down with that too. I think really just don't limit yourself, get rid of your self-limiting beliefs, and just put in the work and just get about the process. Yeah. So this is why I like to talk to you about process all the time. It's like, you can have goals and do all those things, but goals just start falling out of the air. Success just starts falling out of the air if you're just doing your process every day, right? If you're putting in the time, there's no way you cannot be successful.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what it takes, is this process of cracking the code of your brain, figuring out what motivates you, what will stimulate you, whatever it is. And, once you're there putting in the time, that's all those other things that will fall into place, for sure.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the cold shower thing, because I don't actually do that, but I saw that on like some motivational Instagram page, and it got me thinking, like, do you do that, first of all? It didn't get me thinking about that particular thing, but the effectiveness of it is mind-boggling, because like if you can force yourself to do that early in the morning, then like everything else in the rest of the day is like easy.
It's a training for your mind. It really is.
Yeah.
Now you get benefits because of the cold for your body as well. So like decreases inflammation, whatever. But it's just about the mind of making that decision and telling your mind, when I'm in charge, telling your body that the mind is in charge. When you make that decision, your body responds and goes right in the shower, turns it on as cold as it can be, and you just come out of your warm covers. You slept all night, and you're in a little cocoon,
Yeah.
And it's just like that's a head trip to get over to do it for yourself.
Yeah, and the guy that had posted it had like, millions of dollars. He was showing us a picture of whatever, his success. But his purpose behind the post was to, motivate people and just show people what the possibility is.
Yeah,
that's with that just one little change in your lifestyle, which is great.
And I was just up in Montana, so I was visiting a friend of Montana. Just got back from the West Coast, which we'll talk about in a second. So I saw you guys in Salt Lake City, but we went to the hot springs in Bozeman. Okay, so they have a bunch of hot springs up there, and part of the pools, though, they have a cold plunge pool. So we were in the hot springs, and they had like a super hot springs, a medium hot springs, and then the cold plunge. And oh my God, dude, I was like addicted by the end of my time there. Nice. I mean, I must have went in the cold plunge like 10 times, maybe 15 times.
Wow.
It's like the first couple times it's super shocking, and you're like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? And then you start to kind of like get addicted to that feeling.
Like a buzz from it, because your body just produces all these other things that it's not used to getting.
Oh my God, I'm still like having like just like fever dreams about it. Like it was so cool. It was so cool, man. Like I got to figure out how to get a cold plunge tub for myself or something.
Yeah.
But I still do the cold shower thing, and it's still a challenge because you still have to like realize, like this is going to be uncomfortable, but it's like training yourself to be uncomfortable. It's kind of like yoga. It kind of is the same way for me, where like yoga can be very difficult and you're stretching, it's uncomfortable. It's another challenge for your mind. Like they say, the position begins when you want to get out of the position. That's really when the position begins, Yeah. So that concept of overtly stressing yourself and just sitting in the moment and breathing through it. It's like, this is another way to help your mind, control your mind through the next level of thing you want to get to. Mm-hmm. But anyways, okay. In terms of getting to the next thing now I want to focus on why you guys are here. Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys put together this record recently. You're on tour. You're coming to the end of the tour. And so you have a date in Cleveland tonight, which I'm not sure when this podcast got released, probably sometime next week. But you're at the Music Box in Cleveland tonight. And what was fun is I got to see a preview of the show. I'm going to go tonight. But I got the preview of the show out in Salt Lake City because you guys happened to be out there on tour when I was out west.
Yeah.
So that was super fun to see both you guys interact and play together. And if you guys are into saxophone music or jazz or whatever, you must go see Steve Kortyka and Ryan Devlin at some point, solo, together, whatever. Check out their new record because these guys can really just bring it, and they're super fun guys.
Yeah, but a series of circumstances on PM Records. If you're
circumstances, PM Records.
Yeah.
Does PM Records have a website? How do you get this stuff these days?
Yeah. Obviously, we're on Spotify, Apple Music,
Okay.
but PM Records does have a website, and then the record's also on my website, RyanDevlinMusic.com.
Cool.
You can check it out. We have MP3 downloads, physical CDs.
Okay.
The whole thing.
Right on, dude.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about how the tour's been, how the record came together. Like, whose idea was it? Does the record company reach out to you? Was it your idea individually, or what happened?
Yeah, I'll just say something up top because I'll give Ryan a lot of credit for this whole thing even coming together. Ryan has a charm about him where he was able to just approach these high profile musicians. We have Gene Perla, who's 82 years old, but has played with the who's who of all the great jazz musicians throughout history. Mm-hmm. He was able to approach these cats. Also, Adam Nussbaum, amazing drummer, who's recorded with Michael Brecker, John Schofield,
Stan
Getz.
Oh my God, yeah.
Just yeah, and we'll be listening to albums sometimes, and Adam will just happen to be the drummer on the album, and
right.
That's not why we got to the album, but he's just playing on it because he's that much of a staple.
Love it.
But yeah, Ryan was able to get all these cats in the same place. So I'll let him explain how he did that, because I don't know if any one of us other band members would have been able to do what he did. But yeah, that was we knew that we liked playing together, and then I rolled with it, and he was able to get these guys. So yeah, how did you do that?
How'd you do it, dude?
Yeah, that's well, just like I talked about with I have a goal for myself. I'm gonna do whatever I want to go get it.
Yep.
It was sort of the same way. It really started back when I did that Orlando Jazz Workshop where Steve found out about me. It's I had a goal set in mind where Adam Nussbaum was my favorite drummer, so I'm gonna call him and see if he'll come and do my workshop. Even though I was 21 or whatever. I was like, man, if I show that I'm a professional and I can pay him the amount of money that he wants and all this stuff, like why won't he take a chance? So I met him back then, and he came for a whole week and did my workshop. And when I moved to Boston, after we had done like over the pandemic, we had done like 2 videos together, just like from collaborations, where we send each other a track and then we mix it together, post on YouTube, and those did really well. And when I moved to Boston, I told Nussbaum this. I said, hey, I'd love to play again and hang. And I had a kind of a idea of wanting to do a record, twin tenor record. And then after I called Nussbaum, I went to New York for the first time and called Steve and said, hey, man, I have no idea where anything is or what I'm doing here. Can you help me? He was like, yeah, well, funny enough, I'm actually moving. So if you could help me move some of my stuff, I'll give you a ride around the city.
Oh,
and I
cool.
was like, well, deal. So he picked me up from my hotel, and I helped him move around. We got lunch together. We filmed a couple videos on his rooftop of his apartment building. And those like popped off on Instagram. Yeah. Popped off like over like 2,000 likes, 2,500 likes, and like 20,000 views. It was crazy, very big. And I was like, you know what? I've had this idea of doing this twin tenors record. Would you be down to do it? And he was like, yeah. Who do you want in the band? And that's when I was like, well, I know Adam Nussbaum, and we probably talked for a solid month about who we wanted to be in the band, And that same trip that I went to New York, I actually met our piano player, Mike Bond, in Philly.
Okay.
Playing with another saxophone player. His name's Dave Pollock on YouTube. And
Dave, yeah.
Yeah. Great player, great guy.
Yep.
And I was playing with Dave as a sideman for his group, and Mike was on it. And Mike and I hit it off really well, and he's a fantastic player. So then I texted Steve. I was like, hey, I found, I met this really great piano player in Philly. He plays the kind of style that we want for the record. And then we were looking for a bass player. So I called Nussbaum and I said, because I knew Nussbaum played with Perla in a couple different groups. So I called him and I was like, hey, we're thinking about doing this record if you're interested, but we're looking for a bass player. Do you know Gene Perla? And he's like, oh, he's my neighbor. I was like, oh, no way. Wow, what are the chances? So, yeah.
That's crazy.
So he's like, well, here's his number, if you want to call him and see what's going on, if he's got the time or whatever. So I called him up and I was very nervous because, he's on like all of my favorite records and everything. And I said, hey, my name's Ryan. I think he had probably looked me up, because Nussbaum had given him,
maybe talked about it.
Yeah. So I said, hey, I got this record I'm trying to do and maybe a couple gigs out in the New England area. Are you interested in doing this project? And he's like, oh man, I'd love to. I want to. I noticed that you have a love for the Live at the Lighthouse stuff. I love that stuff. And so yeah, and then one thing led to another. We did a couple gigs in January, and then we ended up recording in March. And and then this tour was just kind of like a cohesive booking process. I booked a lot of it. Steve booked a lot of it. Gene booked a few of it.
Okay. I was just going to ask you how that came together. Was there any like somebody just directing it in charge, or was it just kind of like organic, kind of? Yeah. Well, I can do a few dates. I'll
pretty organic.
I'll do this. Okay.
Yeah. I covered a lot of the first part of the tour, like the southern stuff, because I'm being from Florida. I booked a lot of the Florida, and we went to Nashville before Steve joined us. And then we got a gig in New York because of Mike at Smalls, and we got a couple gigs in Pennsylvania because of Gene, and then we got all the Ohio stuff because of Steve.
Adam got us no gigs, just for the record. Nothing.
Can you say that again louder?
Adam Nussbaum got us.
Just in case he's listening out there. I just want to make sure everybody knows. Okay.
No, that part was super interesting to me just because I had never booked that many gigs in a row successfully. And I feel like this has been a great success by any means just because of the time of year that we're trying to do it and the amount of dates in Ohio. Like sometimes we would do Columbus, and then we'd come back to Columbus and do it again. Or we did Cincinnati twice, did Columbus
Both of those
twice.
shows were great though.
Yeah,
and they all turned out. Yeah, they've all been turning out really well because like what happens, and I'm sure you've seen this in all avenues, is like people say they can't be there for something, but that gave me a great segue to be like, well, that's great because we're playing here again.
We'll be here next week.
4 or 5
yeah.
weeks.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And they're like, I can make that one.
Right. Or they'd have to get even more creative with their excuse of why they can't be there or whatever. But for me, I was just trying to fill dates, and look for good venues, and luckily it all just kind of came together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, plus it's like a new entity. It's a new thing. Even if you're individually known or whatever, when you do something together, it's a new record. people got to figure that out for themselves. You
Yeah.
know, they don't necessarily go out to see that right away because they just aren't familiar with it. But that's cool that you got this whole thing together. How did you said what was the name of the record company again? PM Records?
PM Records, yeah.
How did that come about in terms of, were you approaching someone to kind of like find someone to be a distributor, or did you know people again, like kind of initially?
No, I think
that
that
they
was
were
just,
interested in something like
well,
this
that
to
was
put
the-
out?
Yeah, that was the plus of having Gene, just an added bonus because it's his label, the
it's
bass
his
player's
label,
label.
okay.
Yeah, and he's actually, if you have the time or want to do it in the future, he would be great to interview because he's
Yeah.
he's
Oh, really?
doing all
Okay.
this technology stuff. He's got
Really? Okay,
He's got an
interesting.
Instagram and he's
Okay.
he's sending emails all the time. He's like
All day, every
he'll
day.
march off with his computer in the morning and just
And he's
all he
82,
wants to
you
know-
said?
Yeah.
He's rocking it.
He's
Okay,
rocking
love it.
Yeah.
All he
Okay.
ever wants to know is the Wi-Fi password.
That's
Wherever
like
we're
the
at.
number one. That's the number one thing. What time are we leaving, and what's the Wi-Fi
Yeah.
password?
Okay. I love that.
And yeah, it's
Okay.
his record label, and he's always, sending emails about different projects that he's producing and
Yeah.
putting together.
Oh,
So,
neat. Okay.
Yeah, it was just, built in kind of to the
And
band.
he's had he's got Elvin on his label. He's got Steve Grossman on his label. He's got Jan Hammer on his label.
Oh, I didn't
Don
realize that.
Elias
Okay.
on his label. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a major jazz record label. And I mean, Elvin has a quote that he's like, PM Records is where jazz should be, which is a pretty heavy quote.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's sold lots and hundreds of thousands of records, the one On the Mountain with Elvin Jones himself and Jan Hammer is like one of the greatest trio records out there. But yeah, he offered originally. We had an offer from another record label that will go unnamed, but we had an offer from them, and it was cool. But we decided that the PM was just kind of more of the way to go because we were working directly with Gene. We were there for the mixing process. We were there for the editing process. We were there for the recording. The whole thing.
Right.
And he lets us into all that. And we were able to work with him with the contract and like the percentages and all that stuff. Like was very much more personal than it would have been with another label.
Sure.
And especially because it's our first project, we wanted to kind of be more hands on with that, so we know exactly what we want.
Right.
In terms.
Okay,
of all
so that came together before you started recording?
No, that was after.
Or was after you had it in the can, and then you started shopping it to kind
It
of
was
find
like
a label?
around the same
Yeah,
time.
around
It
the
was,
same
it was
time.
pretty organic. Like
Okay.
we had, Gene had a say in where we recorded, right? The
Yeah.
figure eight thing. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, Trading Eights. Yeah.
yeah. So we recorded in New Jersey as per Gene's recommendation. So
Right.
he had some say in
Well, he
that
was
too.
thinking about it probably in
Totally.
advance, I'm sure.
Yeah, and
whether,
he's got
whether you talked about it specifically or not. But
Yeah, and he has a studio in his house, in his
Yeah.
basement, that's pretty, really nice. But to have a piano on it as well, it was just a little tricky because his piano's upstairs, and we wanted to make sure everybody had eye contact. So
Sure.
it's like there was some factors in like where we were because of what he was saying, but. He's got a great guy that does all of his mixing and mastering that we were able to meet and talk with, and I think that's just a gigantic benefit. You don't want to give it to a record company that changes completely what you had in mind for the project.
Right.
So,
For sure. Well, what a great, just resource that you found in Gene, and
Yeah.
great learning experience, and just kind of turn you on to all his resources too. That's super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There should be a word that combines experience and experiment together, because that's like a definitely it feels like both. Like we're trying things and
Yeah.
they don't always work sometimes, and then
Right.
other things work great, and we're just it's very jazzy approach to
Right.
booking a tour and recording an album.
And the next time
I
we do
see.
it, it'll be even better. hopefully.
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, for some of these things from my project management career and other things I've done in terms of developing new things. So just for Ryan's benefit, my background is in advanced technology development. So I was an engineer where you're creating stuff where you're like, how do you invent the iPhone before the iPhone exists?
Right.
So it's like you have to have this vision and figure this stuff out, which is when you're doing creative stuff, it's kind of what it's all about. You don't know exactly what you're doing. Even though you trained yourself, you went to school, you did all these things, but when it comes down to starting a new project, right, you're like, well, yeah, what am I doing? I don't know. But the way I think about it is a picture coming into focus. So you have so many moving parts. You have the individual musicianship, you have the songs, you have the thing you're going to record, you got the production, you got all these things, but they all have to come along in time. You can't get too far ahead with one. right, and not have the other in place or a vision for how to execute that other part of the project.
Right.
So like, I think people get frustrated if they try to run too fast on any one thing without thinking about the full project and bring it all along kind of in concert,
Totally.
So that's like so that's the what did you say, Steve? The experimental and experience thing kind of happening simultaneously,
together.
like
Experiential.
yeah.
Experiential. Wow.
Right. Experiential violence. Wait, did you say? No, you didn't say that. Okay.
No.
All right. Experiential. I like it. No, we're not going to use that word anymore. But
That's going to be my metal jazz
Yeah.
band name.
it's just how to violently train your mind. Okay. I like that. Okay. Well, guys, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's my honor, and thanks for another reason these guys were here today. So you did another little interview in my new space here. So this is cool for me too. This is the first podcast I'm doing in the new basement design, which people that are checking out the Facebook page or whatever out there, or the newsletter. Not newsletter, my email I send out every once in a while. It's not an official newsletter. But you saw the video of what the basement design looks like. So I'm recording recording the podcast for the first time in it, face to face in over about 2.5 years. And these guys were here this morning because they were doing was it radio or TV interview in Pennsylvania somewhere?
Short, there's going to be a short TV slot on Allentown because we're doing a concert
At
what's the
Miller Symphony Hall.
Oh, okay.
In Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
August 19th, and it should be a good turnout. We're super excited about it.
Yeah, they have a jazz series that they do.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it's like every few months or whatever, and we're the act for this month of August.
Nice.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So I was happy to provide the space for you guys.
Yeah,
thanks for the
man.
coffee. They brought me coffee this morning,
Yeah.
so that was nice. And so super fun. All right, so what are we gonna do now, guys? Are we gonna like play some sax or something?
Yeah, man.
All right.
Let's shed, bro.
All right, dude.
Working.
All right, we're gonna get off the podcast. Thanks again, guys. If people want to find you individually or find this record that's out, one more time, where would you send them?
Yeah, Apple Music, Spotify, we have it. RyanDevlinMusic.com you can buy the record there. PMRecords.com, and then my personal Instagram is rfd.sax.
Yep, and I'm Saxophone Steve on Instagram. Just my name, SteveKortyka.com. A lot of information up there about myself. And yeah, if you just type our names into Spotify, you can find the album easiest that way, but we highly recommend getting a physical copy.
Yes.
And you can order that on the PM Records website.
Sounds good. Okay, and all those tags and handles and stuff will be in the show notes, so look for those there. Again, thanks again, guys. Thank you for listening to Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more, join our mailing list at jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com. See you next time, and remember, the revolution has just begun. So dig in, embrace the process of reinvention, and start realizing the success you've always dreamed of. Hey, revolutionaries, if you enjoyed today's episode and today's guest, let them know by commenting on their Facebook page, finding their Twitter handle or Instagram feed, and letting them know you heard them on Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, and tell them what you got out of the episode, what you really liked, or how they inspired you. I know they would get a kick out of it and will help others find the same value that you found.